The bullet whizzed past Jack Harlow's ear, close enough that he felt the air disturbed by its passage. Thunder, his horse, reared in panic when lightning split the sky and rain began pouring in heavy sheets. Jack yanked the reins hard, steadying the animal while his free hand instinctively reached for the Colt revolver at his hip. In the brief flash of lightning, he caught a glimpse of a dark figure moving along the ridge, the glint of a rifle barrel disappearing behind rocks. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to kill Jack Harlow, and given the enemies he'd made, it damn sure wouldn't be the last. At 40, Jack had survived enough ambushes to know when to push forward and when to find cover. With the storm intensifying and night falling fast, this was definitely time for the latter. He spurred Thunder forward, following the narrow trail winding through the canyon. According to the station master back in Silver Springs, there should be a settlement called Rocky Creek somewhere ahead. The rain turned the path to mud, making each step treacherous. Thunder stumbled twice, nearly sending Jack into the growing torrent below. Just when visibility had dropped to almost nothing, Jack spotted lights through the curtain of water. The outskirts of Rocky Creek. The town was little more than a wide spot in the trail, a general store, saloon, small church, and scattered houses. Jack headed straight for the general store, the only building still showing light at this hour. The wooden sign above the door reading "Marshall's Goods" swung violently in the wind. Inside, the proprietor, a heavy-set man with a thick gray mustache, looked up sharply as Jack entered, dripping water onto the worn floorboards. "Mighty bad night to be traveling," the man observed, hand drifting below the counter, where Jack knew a shotgun likely waited. "Didn't have much choice. Storm caught me on the trail." Jack removed his hat, shaking water from the brim. "Name's Jack Harlow, heading north to the Carson Ranch. Got hired on as their new foreman." The storekeeper's posture relaxed slightly. "Marshall's the name. Samuel Marshall." He nodded toward the window. "Nobody with good sense travels these parts after dark, especially not with that storm." Jack placed a few coins on the counter. "Need some coffee, beans, and bacon for the trail. Should reach Carson's place by tomorrow evening if the weather clears." Marshall gathered the supplies while Jack warmed his hands by the pot-bellied stove. The shopkeeper kept glancing at Jack's holster and the rifle strapped to his saddlebags. "You a fighting man, Mr. Harlow?" Marshall asked suddenly. Jack met the man's eyes without blinking. "Served in the Union Army, been ranching and riding since." Marshall nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Thought so. You got that look." He leaned closer over the counter. "Word of advice for your journey north. There's an old trail through Red Canyon that cuts half a day off your ride, but steer clear of the cabin with the red door. Woman living there? She ain't right." "Not right how?" Jack asked, pocketing the coffee. Marshall's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Apache half-breed. Calls herself Elena now. Some say she's a witch." He glanced around nervously. "People who get too close to her come back changed, see things differently, start leaving their wives, abandoning businesses, turning on neighbors." He shook his head. "That girl can see inside your soul, make you face things you've spent your whole life running from. And some men, well, they don't come back at all." Jack had heard plenty of frontier superstition in his time, usually amounted to prejudice against Indians or fear of women who lived independently. "I'll keep that in mind," he said noncommittally. Marshall wasn't finished. 3 months back, Sheriff Milton rode out there to check on a disturbance, came back and just quit, handed in his badge, left his wife of 20 years, said he couldn't live a lie anymore. The shopkeeper's eyes were wide. "Strangest thing is, land around that cabin's been fetching high offers lately. Mayor's been trying to buy her out for months. Says it's for the railroad, but..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Jack's interest peaked. "But what?" Marshall shook his head. "Nothing. Just rumors." Jack nodded his thanks, gathered his supplies, and headed back into the storm. As he mounted Thunder, He noticed three men watching him from the shadows of the saloon porch across the street. Their posture was too alert, too focused for casual onlookers. One man struck a match, illuminating a face Jack recognized with a jolt. Rollins, one of Bill Slater's hired guns. Jack's hand inched toward his revolver. He'd put a bullet in Slater's shoulder 2 years back when the man tried to run small ranchers off their land near Cheyenne. Slater had sworn revenge, but Jack had figured that threat was long behind him. Apparently not. Jack nudged Thunder forward, keeping his pace steady as he headed out of town. No point confronting them in the middle of a storm. Better to gain some distance. Find defensive ground if it came to that. The canyon trail would be too dangerous to navigate in this weather anyway. An hour later, the storm had intensified to biblical proportions. Lightning split the sky every few minutes. Wind howled through the rocks, and the rain fell in stinging sheets. Even thunder, normally steady in any conditions, was struggling. Worse, Jack had spotted lantern light behind him twice now. Slater's men were definitely following, despite the weather. That's when he saw it through a break in the downpour. A small cabin nestled against the canyon wall, light flickering in the window. And on the door, just visible in a flash of lightning, a splash of faded red paint. The witch's cabin. Jack hesitated. Marshall's warning echoed in his mind, but another crack of thunder decided for him. Shelter now, superstition later. He dismounted, led Thunder to a small lean-to beside the cabin, and approached the door. Just as he raised his hand to knock, a bullet splintered the wood frame inches from his head. "That's close enough, stranger." A woman's voice, steady and clear despite the storm. "State your business or start walking." Jack raised his hand slowly. "Name's Jack Harlow. Just looking for shelter from the storm. I've got men tracking me, and I need somewhere to wait them out." Silence stretched for several seconds. Then the door opened just enough to reveal a woman's face. Young, maybe 30, with striking features that revealed her mixed heritage. Dark eyes burned with wariness and something else. A kind of fierce intelligence that seemed to look right through him. In her hands, a shotgun remained pointed steadily at his chest. "Men following you?" she asked. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that'll pass us both by if I can just get out of sight until morning." Her eyes narrowed as she studied him. Jack felt strangely exposed, as if she could indeed see past his words to the truth beneath. Finally, she stepped back slightly. "1 hour," she said. "You stay by the door. Don't ask questions. Don't look around. And when the storm breaks, you leave." Jack nodded. "Fair enough." She opened the door just wide enough for him to enter, keeping the shotgun trained on him. The cabin was smaller than it had appeared from outside. Just one room with a stone fireplace, a small table, a narrow bed in the corner, and shelves lined with jars of herbs and strange objects. What caught Jack's attention, though, were the walls. Symbols had been carved into the wood, some Apache, others Jack didn't recognize. And there were tallies, hundreds of them, as if she'd been counting the days. Or something else. The woman, Elena, if Marshall had her name right, moved to the far side of the room, never turning her back to him. The shotgun remained in her hands, ready. "You're dripping on my floor," she said flatly. Jack removed his duster, hanging it on a peg near the door. Water pooled at his boots. "Sorry about that. Storm came on fast." He glanced toward the window. "Mind if I check outside? Need to know if we've been followed." She nodded once, sharply. Jack moved to the window, carefully pushing aside the worn cloth covering it. Through the sheets of rain, he could see nothing but darkness. If Slater's men were still on his trail, the storm had at least slowed them down. "You said men are following you," Elena said, breaking her own no-questions rule. "Why?" Jack turned from the window. "Old grudge. Man named Slater. I crossed him a couple years back when he was trying to force some ranchers off their land. And now he wants revenge." It wasn't a question. "3 of his men were in Rocky Creek. Spotted me leaving Marshall's store." Elena's expression hardened at the shopkeeper's name. Samuel Marshall is a liar and a coward. Whatever he told you about me, it wasn't the truth. He said people are afraid of you. That part's true enough. A bitter smile touched her lips. People fear what they don't understand, and they understand very little. Thunder rolled, shaking the cabin's walls. The fire in the hearth guttered, then flared again, casting dancing shadows across Elena's face. In that moment, with her eyes reflecting the flames and her expression fierce and untamed, Jack could understand why the townspeople might believe her to be something otherworldly. "What exactly do they think you are?" Jack asked, breaking another of her rules. Elena's grip tightened on the shotgun. "I told you, no questions. Just trying to understand what I've walked into." She studied him for a long moment. "They call me witch, devil, demon, whatever frightens them most. The truth is simpler and harder for them to accept." She gestured toward the symbols carved in the walls. "Protection, boundaries. I keep myself separate because people can't handle what happens when they get too close to me." "And what's that?" Elena placed the shotgun on the table, but remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "I make them see things they don't want to see, truths they've spent their lives denying." Her voice grew quieter. "When people look at me, really look, they see themselves reflected back. All their lies, their compromises, the parts of themselves they've buried, and most can't bear it." Jack's skepticism must have shown on his face because she laughed, a sharp, harsh sound without humor. "You think I'm crazy or lying?" She stepped closer, her dark eyes challenging. "What are you running from, Jack Harlow? What truths are you afraid to face?" Jack held her gaze. "I've seen too much death to run from truth, ma'am. War has a way of stripping away lies." Something changed in Elena's expression, surprise and maybe a hint of respect. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses cut through the storm. She moved quickly to the window, peering out through a crack in the shutters. "3 riders," she whispered. "Armed." Jack drew his revolver, checking that the powder was still dry. "Slater's men, they must have followed my trail." He moved to the door. "I should go out, draw them away from here." "Too late." Elena's voice was tight. "They've already seen your horse in the lean-to." One of the men shouted through the storm. "Harlow, we know you're in there. Come out now, and maybe we'll let the woman live." Jack positioned himself beside the window, back to the wall. "Stay down and away from the windows." He glanced at Elena. "This is my fight, not yours." To his surprise, she had retrieved a rifle from beneath her bed and was checking its load. "When strangers threaten me in my own home, it becomes my fight." Her movements were practiced, confident, clearly not her first time preparing for violence. "I'll go out," Jack said. "Keep them focused on me." Elena nodded. "There's a stack of firewood on the east side. Good cover if you can reach it." Jack nodded, appreciating her tactical thinking. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," she cut him off. "But if it does, there's a trapdoor under the rug. Tunnel leads out to a cave about 50 yards east." That explained how she'd survived out here alone. Jack checked his gun once more, then stepped to the door. "Just stay inside," he said quietly. Then he yanked open the door and stepped out into the rain. The 3 men had positioned themselves in a loose semicircle about 20 yards from the cabin. 2 had dismounted, using their horses as partial cover. The third, Rollins, remained mounted, a Winchester rifle balanced across his saddle. "Evening, gentlemen," Jack called, keeping his voice calm despite the rain plastering his shirt to his body. "Little late for a social call." "You know why we're here, Harlow," Rollins shouted back. "Slater sends his regards. Says it's time to settle accounts." Jack kept his revolver low at his side, not yet raising it. "Slater should have let sleeping dogs lie. I've got no quarrel with him now." "Well, he's still got one with you." Rollins spat into the mud. 2 years he's been waiting. Shoulder never healed right. Says he can feel that bullet of yours every time it rains." "That's a shame," Jack said, edging slightly to his right, toward the woodpile Elena had mentioned. But I was just defending those farmers, same as any man would. Slater says different. Says you made it personal. Rollins gestured with his rifle. Now, we can do this quick or we can do it messy. Your choice. Jack gauged distances, angles, his chances against three armed men. Not good, but he'd faced worse odds. There's a woman inside, he said. She's got nothing to do with this. Let's take this down the trail, away from here. The man to Rollins' left, a wiry fellow with a scarred face, laughed. You worried about the witch? Hell, we'd be doing everyone a favor putting her down too. Jack's expression hardened. The lady stays out of it. Not your call. Rollins raised his rifle. Last chance to come quiet, Harlow. Jack didn't wait for him to finish the sentence. In one fluid motion, he drew and fired, his first shot striking the scarred man in the chest. As the man crumpled, Jack dove for the woodpile, a bullet from Rollins' rifle splintering the logs inches from his head. The third man fired wildly, bullets thudding into the wood and dirt. Jack rolled to the edge of the pile, took careful aim, and put a bullet through the man's shoulder. He went down screaming. The gunfight erupted into chaos, the storm adding to the confusion. Rain pounded down, thunder boomed overhead, and muzzle flashes lit up the night like deadly lightning. Jack moved with precision born from years of combat, each shot deliberate despite the chaos. Rollins had dismounted now, using his spooked horse as cover. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but Jack could make out the man's shape, moving to flank him. A shot rang out from the cabin, Elena with her rifle. Rollins cursed as the bullet grazed his leg. He fired back at the window, then turned his attention to Jack again. You're dead, Harlow, he shouted over the storm. You and that witch both. Jack counted his remaining bullets. 3. He'd have to make them count. He waited, listening for movement, then heard a splash to his right. He pivoted and fired in one motion. Rollins let out a strangled cry and fell face first into the mud. For several seconds, the only sound was the pounding rain and the moans of the wounded man by the horses. Jack approached Rollins cautiously, gun still trained on him. The man wasn't moving. Jack kicked away his rifle, then checked for a pulse. Nothing. His shot had found its mark. The wounded man was trying to mount his horse with one good arm. Jack strode toward him, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him down into the mud. Please, the man begged. I was just following orders. Who else knows Slater sent you after me? Jack demanded. No one. Just us 3. The man clutched his bleeding shoulder. Slater's in town, staying at the hotel. He's got business with the mayor. Jack frowned at this unexpected information. What kind of business? Don't know exactly. Something about land rights. The man's face was pale from blood loss and fear. They're planning something big. Been talking about gold in the creek. Please let me go. I won't come back. Jack considered his options. Killing a wounded man in cold blood wasn't his style, but leaving an enemy at his back wasn't smart either. Your horse knows the way back to town? He asked. The man nodded frantically. Then ride. Tell Slater if he wants me, he can come himself next time. Jack stepped back. And tell him to leave the woman out of it. The man scrambled onto his horse with difficulty and galloped off into the storm. Jack watched him go, then turned back to the cabin. Elena stood in the doorway, rifle still in hand. You let him live, she observed, her expression unreadable. Man deserves a chance to rethink his life choices. Jack grimaced as he felt a burning along his side. Looking down, he saw blood seeping through his shirt. A bullet had grazed his ribs during the fight. Elena noticed it too. Come inside. I can tend to that. Back in the cabin, Elena moved with practiced efficiency, gathering herbs and cloth for bandages. Jack removed his shirt, revealing a lean, muscled torso marked with old scars, testament to a life of violence and hard work. Sit, she ordered, gesturing to a chair by the fire. As Jack obeyed, she soaked a cloth in a bowl of water and began cleaning his wound. Jack watched her work, her movements precise and confident. "You've done this before. Too many times." Her voice was flat. "Living alone out here, you learn to take care of yourself." She pressed a poultice of herbs to his wound, then wrapped a clean bandage around his ribs. Her touch was gentle despite her brusque manner. "Your friend mentioned gold in the creek," Jack said, watching her reaction closely. "That why the mayor's so interested in your land?" Elena's hands stilled momentarily, then resumed their work. "Last spring, a prospector found color in the creek bed. Small deposits, but enough to make greedy men take notice." She tied off the bandage and stepped back. "The mayor's been trying to run me off ever since. First with offers, then threats. And the railroad spur story? A lie to hide their real intentions from the townspeople." She turned away, putting her supplies back on a shelf. "Porter, that's the mayor, and Slater have some arrangement. I don't know the details." "That explains why Slater's in town." Jack tested the bandage, wincing slightly. "He's not just after me. You're on his list too." Elena's laugh was bitter. "I've been on everyone's list since the day I was born. Half-breed daughter of a white trader who disappeared before I drew first breath." She looked at him directly. "The tribe tolerated me until my abilities became evident. Then tolerance turned to fear." "These abilities," Jack said carefully, "you really can see inside people." "Not in the way they think. I don't read minds or cast spells." Her dark eyes held his. "I just see truth. Always have. Can't turn it off. When someone is lying to themselves, living behind masks, I see it. And sometimes they see it too when they look at me." Jack nodded slowly as understanding dawned. "So Sheriff Milton didn't leave his wife because you bewitched him. He left because he finally faced the truth about his marriage." Elena stared at him, genuine surprise in her expression. "You're the first person who's ever understood that." She moved to the fire, adding another log. "The medicine man said I carry the spirit of revealing water, a reflection that shows what is hidden. He meant it as a blessing." Her shoulders slumped slightly. "It wasn't." Jack watched the play of firelight across her face. "And that's why you live out here alone? Because people can't handle seeing themselves clearly? When a man realizes he's wasted 20 years in a loveless marriage, it's easier to blame the witch than his own choices," she said quietly. "When a woman leaves her husband after he beats her for the 100th time, they say I poisoned her mind." She turned back to face him, firelight casting shadows across her features. "What they never understand is that I don't change anything. I just make it impossible to keep lying to themselves." Outside, the storm was beginning to abate, rain falling more steadily now, the thunder moving off into the distance. "Your hour is almost up," Elena said quietly. Jack nodded, though he made no move to leave. "That man who got away will bring back others. Slater won't let this go, and now he knows where to find me." He met her eyes directly. "Where to find you?" Elena's expression hardened. "I can take care of myself." "I don't doubt it." Jack stood, testing his bandage side. "But Slater doesn't fight fair, and it sounds like he's got the town in his pocket." "What are you suggesting?" Her voice held suspicion. "I could stay, just until morning. Keep watch." He gestured toward the door. "Slater's wounded pride might drive him out here tonight, storm or no storm." Elena studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see right through him. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? For the witch everyone fears? I've seen what happens when good people stand by while others suffer." Jack's voice was quiet but firm. "Saw it in the war, saw it after. Never could stomach it." For the first time, something like surprise flickered in Elena's expression. Then she nodded slowly. "Until morning," she agreed. "Then we both face what comes next." Neither of them suspected just how soon that reckoning would arrive, or what form it would take. Dawn broke clear and cold after the storm. Jack stood on the cabin's small porch, cup of coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the canyon walls in shades of red and gold. His side ached where the bullet had grazed him, but Elena's poultice had prevented infection and dulled the worst of the pain. Inside, she was gathering herbs, moving with the quiet efficiency he'd come to appreciate during their night of uneasy alliance. They'd taken turns keeping watch, though no more of Slater's men had appeared. "Riders coming," she said suddenly from behind him. Jack hadn't heard her approach, another skill honed by years of solitary survival. He squinted into the distance where a cloud of dust marked the approach of several horsemen, still a mile or more away. "Too many for Slater's remaining men," he observed. 8, maybe 10 riders. Elena's face was grim. "The town, then. They've finally worked up the courage to come for me." She disappeared back into the cabin, returning moments later with her rifle and a leather satchel. "You should go. Take the canyon trail north. You can still make it to the Carson Ranch by nightfall." Jack didn't move. "And leave you to face a mob alone? This isn't your fight." "Seems to me it became my fight when I brought Slater's men to your door." Jack checked his revolver, then reloaded his rifle. "Besides, 10 to 1 are poor odds, even for someone as capable as you." They worked quickly, barricading windows, positioning ammunition for easy access, creating defensive positions. Jack marveled at Elena's tactical mind. She clearly thought through defending her home many times before. As the riders came into clear view, Jack recognized the lead figure with a jolt of anger. Bill Slater himself, his broad-shouldered frame unmistakable even at a distance. Beside him rode a well-dressed man Jack didn't recognize, likely the mayor Marshall had mentioned. Behind them came 8 more men, some looking like proper townsfolk, others clearly hired guns. "That's Mayor Porter next to Slater," Elena confirmed, watching from the window. "He's been trying to force me off this land for over a year." The group halted about 50 yards from the cabin. Slater's voice carried clearly across the distance. "Harlow, we know you're in there. Come out and face justice for killing my men." Jack glanced at Elena. "Stay inside. Let me talk to them first." "Be careful," she warned. "Porter's smooth, but he's more dangerous than Slater, and he wants this land badly." Jack stepped outside, rifle held loosely in his hands but ready. He positioned himself on the porch, using the support post for partial cover. "Morning, Slater," he called. "Been a while. Shoulder healing up all right?" Slater's face darkened with anger. The man was in his 50s, heavy-set but still powerful, with a cruel set to his mouth. "You've got nerve, Harlow. Killing my boys, hiding with this witch." The mayor, Porter, raised a hand placatingly. "Now, gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Mr. Harlow, I'm Mayor Thomas Porter. There seems to be a misunderstanding here." "No misunderstanding," Jack replied. "Your friend Slater sent men to kill me last night. They failed. Now you've brought a bigger party to try again." Porter shook his head, all practiced concern. "We're simply here to uphold the law. Murder is a serious charge. Self-defense isn't murder." Jack kept his tone even. "And while we're talking about the law, maybe you could explain why Rocky Creek's mayor is riding with a known land grabber like Bill Slater?" A murmur ran through some of the townsmen. Porter's smile became strained. "Mr. Slater is a business associate. He's invested considerably in our little town's future." "Let me guess," Jack said. "That future involves taking this land." He gestured toward the cabin. "What's so valuable about this particular patch of canyon that you'd resort to running a woman off her property?" Porter's expression tightened. "Progress requires sacrifice. The railroad spur coming through this canyon will bring prosperity to Rocky Creek. Her home is in the way." "Railroad spur?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "Funny, I heard there was gold in the creek. Which is it, Mayor?" Several of the townsmen exchanged glances, confusion evident on their faces. "Don't listen to his lies," Slater growled. "The witch has gotten to him already." Elena stepped out of the cabin then, papers in one hand, rifle in the other. "I have documents proving this land belongs to me. My father may have abandoned us, but he did leave this land to my mother, and she left it to me." Porter's face flushed with anger. "This Indian witch is trying to turn you against your own neighbors," he called to the townsman. just like she did with Sheriff Milton. Milton saw the papers in your safe, Elena countered, her voice carrying clearly. The real agreement with the mining company. That's why he quit, because he couldn't bear to help you rob his friends and neighbors. Uncertainty showed on several faces among the posse. Jack sensed the moment balancing on a knife's edge. These men weren't all hardened killers like Slater's bunch. They were farmers and shopkeepers, easy to lead but not naturally violent. Think about what you're doing, Jack addressed them directly. 10 armed men against one woman defending her home. Is that the kind of men you want to be? The kind of story you want told about Rocky Creek? A heavy-set man in the back of the group, the blacksmith by the look of his arms, spoke up. Is it true, Mayor? About the gold? Porter's mask of civility slipped. Shut up and do your duty. That woman has bewitched enough minds in this town. No one's bewitched, Jack said. Just asking simple questions that deserve honest answers. Enough talk. Slater suddenly drew his gun, aiming directly at Jack. Harlow dies now, and then we deal with the witch. Everything happened at once. Jack threw himself sideways as Slater fired, the bullet splintering the wood where he'd been standing. Elena dove for cover inside the cabin door. The townsmen scattered, some drawing weapons, others pulling back in confusion. Jack rolled to his feet, firing his rifle. His shot caught Slater in the arm, spinning the man halfway around but not dropping him. Two of Slater's hired guns opened fire, forcing Jack back against the cabin wall. Elena's rifle cracked from the window, dropping one of the gunmen. Porter was shouting orders, trying to organize the chaotic scene. Jack made it inside the cabin as bullets thudded into the outer walls. They'll rush us soon, he said grimly, reloading his rifle. Too many angles to cover. Elena nodded, her face set with determination. The tunnel! We could... No time. They've got us surrounded. Jack peered through a crack in the shutters. Slater's men are circling around back. Outside, Porter's voice rose over the confusion. Burn it down! Burn the witch out! Elena's face paled, but her hands remained steady on her rifle. They've been wanting to do that for years. The witch and all her dangerous ideas, purified by fire. Jack looked around the cabin, at the symbols of protection carved into the walls, at the herbs and remedies that had healed his wound, at the life Elena had built against all odds. Anger burned in his chest, hot and clarifying. Not today, he said firmly. Not while I'm still breathing. A flaming torch arced through the air, landing on the cabin roof. Another followed, catching in the dry wood of the lean-to. We have to move now, Jack said. Make for the rocks east of here. I'll cover you. Elena shook her head. We fight together or not at all. Her eyes held his, unflinching. I'm tired of running, Jack. Tired of hiding who I am. Before Jack could respond, the thunder of approaching hooves cut through the gunfire and shouts. From the eastern ridge, a group of riders appeared, at least 15 strong, moving with practiced precision. Apache, Elena whispered, disbelief in her voice. The newcomers rode hard into the fray, their arrival throwing Porter's posse into confusion. These were no random tribesmen. They moved with military discipline, their rifles providing covering fire as they established a perimeter around the cabin. In their lead rode a striking woman, her silver-streaked hair and proud bearing, marking her as someone of importance. She directed the warriors with hand signals, then dismounted and approached the cabin. Elena, she called in a clear voice. It's time to come home, my daughter. Elena froze, staring at the woman as if seeing a ghost. Mother, she breathed, her voice barely audible. Taking advantage of the distraction, Slater raised his gun, aiming at Jack with murderous intent. Jack saw the movement too late, knowing he wouldn't be able to return fire in time. A shot rang out, but it was Elena who had fired, her bullet catching Slater in the chest. The big man staggered backward, surprise etched on his face, then collapsed into the dust. Porter, seeing his partner fall and faced with organized Apache resistance, lost his nerve. Retreat, he shouted to his remaining men. Back to town. The posse scattered, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Only Porter hesitated, his face contorted with rage as he looked back at the cabin. "This isn't over," he spat before spurring his horse away. As the dust settled, Elena stood in the doorway, staring at the woman who had called herself her mother. The Apache riders maintained their positions, weapons ready but not threatening. "Nijoni," Elena said, using a name Jack hadn't heard before. "I thought you were dead." The older woman approached slowly, her face lined with years of hardship, but her eyes bright and clear, the same penetrating gaze Elena possessed. "Not dead, daughter. Searching. It took me 3 years to find the courage to face what I had allowed to happen." She stopped a few paces from the porch. "The tribal council has changed. The old medicine man who feared your gift has died. We have come to bring you home, if you will come." Elena's composure, maintained through gunfire and death threats, finally cracked. Her hand trembled on her rifle. "Home? After you stood by and let them drive me out? After 3 years alone?" "I have no excuses," Nijoni said quietly. "Only regret, and the promise that it will be different now. Your gift is needed. The tribe faces new threats, new encroachments." She gestured toward the retreating townsmen. "Men like these, with papers and promises instead of guns, but just as dangerous." Jack watched Elena, seeing the conflict in her face, the longing for connection warring with 3 years of bitter solitude. "These men will return," Nijoni continued. "The gold they seek will draw more. Alone you cannot stand against what is coming." Elena looked back at the cabin, her refuge and her prison for 3 years. Then her eyes found Jack's, questioning. "Go with them," he said quietly. "You've been alone long enough." "And you?" she asked, something vulnerable in her voice. "Where will you go?" Before Jack could answer, a commotion arose among the Apache warriors. One of Slater's wounded men had drawn a hidden pistol and was raising it toward Nijoni. Jack moved without thinking, throwing himself forward as the gun fired. Pain exploded in his chest as the bullet found him instead of its intended target. He heard Elena cry out, felt her hands catching him as he fell. The world narrowed to her face above him, the sky beyond, the taste of copper in his mouth. Apache warriors subdued the shooter, but the sound seemed distant now. "Jack!" Elena's voice penetrated the growing fog. "Stay with me!" He tried to speak, but blood bubbled at his lips. Elena tore open his shirt, her hands pressing against the wound, trying to stem the flow. "Don't you dare die," she commanded, tears tracking down her face. "Not for me. Not after everything." Nijoni knelt beside them, her experienced hands examining the wound. "The bullet is deep. We must get him to the tribe. Our healer may be able to save him." Jack's vision was fading, darkness creeping in at the edges. Elena's face hovered above him, fierce and determined. The last thing he felt before consciousness slipped away was the press of her lips against his forehead. Gentle, desperate, a promise. "Live," she whispered. "Please live." 6 months later, Jack Harlow stood on a ridge overlooking a small valley where the Apache had established their new settlement. Far enough from Rocky Creek to avoid conflict, but close enough to monitor the increasing encroachment of miners and settlers. The bullet that had nearly killed him had left its mark, a deep scar and an occasional shortness of breath. But Apache medicine and Elena's determined care had brought him back from the brink. The valley below bustled with activity. Unlike the stereotypical temporary camps Jack had seen before, this settlement had permanence. Sturdy lodges, cultivated fields, horses in corrals. The tribe was adapting, finding ways to maintain their identity while preparing for the changes sweeping across the territory. During his recovery, Jack had put his knowledge of territorial law to use, helping the tribe secure legal rights to this valley. He'd confronted the territorial governor himself, presenting evidence of Porter's corruption and the tribe's rightful claim to the land. The mayor was now sitting in a jail cell, awaiting trial for fraud and conspiracy. Carson's son had been elected the new sheriff of Rocky Creek, young but fair and determined to see justice done. She is looking for you, a voice said behind him. Jack turned to find Nijoni approaching, her expression warm but reserved. During his recovery, he had come to respect the older woman's wisdom and strength. Like her daughter, she saw too clearly, but age had tempered her directness with compassion. She's been busy with the council, Jack replied, teaching them what she knows about the white man's laws and papers. I didn't want to disturb her. Nijoni smiled knowingly. My daughter has spent too many years alone. Do not make her wait longer than necessary. She looked out over the valley. The tribal leaders have asked me to thank you again for what you did in Silver City last month. The land deed you secured has given us protection the government would not. Jack nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Just doing what's right. They stood in companionable silence, watching the activity below. Finally, Nizoni spoke again, her voice gentle but direct. You have not claimed the position at the Carson Ranch. You have not moved on. Yet you stay at the edge of our camp, neither leaving nor fully joining us. She turned to face him fully. What is it you want, Jack Harlow? The question cut to the heart of the restlessness Jack had felt since recovering from his wound. For 20 years, he drifted from job to job, fight to fight, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. Now something held him here, and they both knew what, or rather who it was. I'm not sure I belong anywhere, he admitted. Not in town, not at the ranch, certainly not among your people. Perhaps belonging is not found in a place, Nijoni suggested, but in a purpose, in people. She touched his arm briefly. Elena is at the river, the southern bend where the willows grow. With that, she turned and walked back down the trail toward the settlement. Jack remained on the ridge a moment longer, then mounted his horse and rode toward the river. He found Elena exactly where her mother had indicated, sitting on a flat rock beside the flowing water, sorting through plants she'd gathered. The months among her people had changed her. The constant tension in her shoulders had eased, her movements more fluid, her expression less guarded. She looked up as he approached, and a smile transformed her face. I was beginning to think you'd left without saying goodbye, she said as he dismounted. No goodbyes yet. Jack sat beside her on the rock. Just needed some time to think. Elena nodded, understanding. Her gift of seeing truth meant she rarely needed explanations. And what did you decide? That I'm tired of running, tired of never staying in one place long enough to know if it could be home. He looked at her directly. Your mother asked what I want. I think you already know the answer. I see many possible answers, Elena replied carefully, but I would rather hear it from you. Jack took a deep breath. I want to stay, not just near the tribe, but with you. Carson offered me the foreman position again yesterday. Said I could build a place on the southeast corner of his land, right where it borders this valley. Hope flickered in Elena's eyes, quickly guarded. And what would Jack Harlow, respected ranch foreman, want with a half-breed witch who makes people uncomfortable with the truth? The truth hasn't made me uncomfortable in a long time, Jack said quietly. Not since a stormy night when a woman with a shotgun and healing hands showed me there are things worth fighting for, worth staying for. Elena's hand found his, fingers intertwining. The people in town will talk. They'll say I've bewitched you. Let them talk. Jack's grip tightened on hers. I've spent 40 years caring too much about what other people think. I'm done with that. She leaned forward then, and there were no interruptions this time. No gunfire, no approaching mob. Just a man and a woman who had both spent too long in solitude, finding in each other something worth staying for. As the sun began to set over the valley, Jack Harlow realized he had finally found what had eluded him since the war. Not just purpose or belonging, but peace. Here, on the border between two worlds, watching over the tribe that had become his responsibility and the woman who had become his heart, he had found his place at last. That night, Jack rode to the highest ridge east of the valley, his rifle across his saddle. From this vantage point, He could see for miles in all directions. The town lights in the distance, the mining camps springing up along the creek, and the peaceful Apache settlement below. Setting his rifle across his knees, he settled in to keep watch. The tribe had given him a new name, Protector of the Horizon. As the stars appeared overhead and the night winds carried the sounds of the valley up to his post, Jack Harlow embraced his new purpose. He was no longer a drifter, no longer a man without ties. He had found his home, his people, his reason for being, and he would protect them with his last breath.